All right, good morning and welcome to everyone. Welcome to New Horizons and to the Upgrade to vSphere 8, What You Need to Know webinar. My name is Sean Bolin. I am a trainer with New Horizons Corp. I'm our lead virtualization and cloud trainer. I've been with the company now a little bit over 16 years. I will be the leader slash host for our event today. Again, thank you for taking a couple minutes to join us. We have a lot to talk about, so I'm not going to bother with too much of an introduction here, although you can kind of see where I've been, what I've done, etc. out here. This particular webinar is one of a couple that we have put together for vSphere 8 specifically. A couple months back, I did a webinar that was discussing what's new in vSphere 8. If you missed that one, if you go to the New Horizons website and click on the webinar section, you can see that archived webinar out there. So if you're wondering, what are some of the cool new features of vSphere 8 that might tempt you into upgrading, have a look at that particular event. For our event today, what we are going to focus on is the upgrade or migration process specifically. What does it take to upgrade to vSphere 8? What are some of the different prerequisites? What are some of the things that have changed which impact your ability to do a successful upgrade? Looking at the upgrade sequence, etc. Because we are talking about a specific function here, in this case, upgrades or migrations, this is going to be a fairly technical webinar. I'm going to be talking about addressing some specific concerns, how we can do that, technology, sequence, etc. Now, as we go through today, if you have a comment, a question, an observation, something like that, please feel free to toss that into the chat window quite literally any time. I will be monitoring the chat window. If I see a question come up that I can handle and address immediately, I will certainly do that. I am going to try to leave some time towards the end of the event for just kind of a general Q&A. So if you hold your questions for that particular time, that is okay as well. The one other option that you have in getting your questions answered is I am open to you sending me an email. So I'm going to put my email address in the chat window. It was also on the opening slide. If there's a question you want to ask and maybe you don't want to bring it up in front of the group, or maybe tomorrow you think, oh, I wish I would have asked that, please feel free to fire me off an email. I'm always glad to take a follow-up conversation offline, etc. So we're going to look at vSphere availability, some pre-upgrade considerations. We'll look at the overall sequence of how do we upgrade vSphere. We'll then take a look specifically at vCenter component upgrades, ESXi host component considerations, and then VMware tools and virtual machine hardware upgrades. All right, let's get started. Let's have some fun. Now, in terms of availability, if you haven't noticed, vSphere 8's available. It actually was announced last year in August. It was at the VMware Explore event that used to be called VMworld. Old people like me still call it VMworld, but it was a VM Explore event. So they announced that, hey, vSphere 8 is here. The product actually dropped or launched back in October. That's when it became available. People started downloading it, installing it, etc. Just a couple of weeks ago, VMware rolled out vSphere 8 Update 1. So we've had our first official update or version upgrade of vSphere out there. Now, I'm mentioning the Update 1 release, which again just happened, because some customers, when a major new product comes out, like when vSphere 8 was announced, some customers say, we want to upgrade, but we don't want to be the first one to jump into the pool. We're going to hold off until that first major update comes out, kind of thinking, well, maybe if there's issues, things will get solved by then, etc. So if you are one of those companies who likes to hold off and not quite be on that hemorrhaging edge, now would be a good time to consider your upgrade because, excuse me, update 1 has officially dropped. The other thing that I want to point out, if you're unaware, when you look at the way VMware versions their products, like literally the version number, when VMware comes out with something that is considered a new major version or an official update, the major minor version numbers are going to change. So when vSphere 8 first released, it was version 8.0.0. When update 1 came out, it became 8.0.1. That incrementation of that version number is how we can tell, hey, is this an official update versus the monthly patches that come out. You know, when VMware releases patches for things, that's going to update this trailing number out here. Those aren't considered actual official upgrade. It's when that major minor version number changes. So vSphere 8's been out since late last year. Update 1 is out now. So don't wait around. Let's dive in and get upgraded to vSphere 8. Now, as far as pre-upgrade considerations, before we, charge headlong into the wall here, what do we need to be aware of? Now, these are some general ideas. I'm going to get some specifics coming in just a moment. First of all, in order to do a direct upgrade, in order to get to vSphere 8, you must be running either version 6.7, that's the oldest version you could run, or any of the 7.x versions. Now, where that is significant is for companies who have not upgraded or migrated in a while. If you're sitting there thinking, wait a minute, we're still on 6.5, you have more work to do. You could not go straight from 6.5 to 8. That's too big a jump. That's not allowed. You can't do that. You have to be on at oldest version 6.7 or any of the 7x versions. Then you can do a direct jump to version 8. If you are older than that, again, you're in the 6.5 era or something like that, you'd kind of be left with a choice. And it's not a great choice of, okay, let's get to 6.7 and then we'll jump to 8, kind of do a double upgrade. Or some environments say, you know what, we're going to get to 8. Our hardware's pretty old anyway. We're going to be buying new hardware. So some environments, instead of doing an upgrade, they just build a brand new system. Install vCenter, brand new, fresh, create some new hosts, buy new hardware, and migrate their VMs over. That's a choice you could have if you are on something older than 6.7 of, hey, we're just going to cut and build a brand new environment and suck our VMs over. It's something to think about. But if you're on 6.7 or later, you can do a direct jump to 8. Now, pre-upgrade, a couple of other ideas here. Performing a full vCenter server backup. We're going to go through the process of upgrading vCenter in just a moment, so stay tuned for those details. But as a general rule, and this is not just for VMware, this is for pretty much anything we work with, any technology, we are not going to try to undertake a major upgrade or major change without having a good backup. You should be backing up all of your stuff regularly anyway, but do not pass go, do not collect $200. Don't try your upgrade without having good backup. The most critical piece to backup is vCenter server, because we're going to be upgrading that directly. You might be thinking, well, shouldn't I back up all my VMs too? I would. But realize that when we go through the upgrade process, we're not actually directly touching your virtual machines. We're going to upgrade vCenter, then we're going to upgrade the host. The VMs themselves aren't touched. I always like to have good backups of literally everything, but vCenter would be the absolute first thing to think about backing up. Another general idea is if you have major issues or problems in your environment, see if you can get those fixed before you undertake the upgrade. Now, I do note, and this has happened to me, that you might be looking at going through an upgrade to help fix some things you have going on. And that's certainly okay. That's maybe a motivation upgrade. But if your networking is broken, your storage is broken, etc., an upgrade is not going to magically fix that broken component out there. We want to fix those things first before we undertake our upgrade. Now, there's several tools that we have to potentially help us do some just initial diagnostics. If you are a user of VMware's Skyline monitoring product, Skyline Advisor out there, that is a tool that helps you in diagnosing problems. If you're not a Skyline user, you might want to have a look at something called the VMware Diagnostic Tool. That's a fling, which is a little free piece of software that VMware has that can help do just diagnostics of, hey, is everything okay in my environment right now? For those of you who are unfamiliar with that fling, I threw a link in the chat window for you out there to take a look at that. Also, one other idea here is if you are currently running vCenter HA, that's short for high availability. That is, you have gone through and set up the high availability component for vCenter. VMware recommends that you basically take apart or decommission the HA setup for vCenter before you do your upgrade. It makes the upgrade process a little bit less complex. It reduces the number of steps you have to go through. Basically, you dismantle your vCenter HA, do your upgrade to vSphere 8, and then reestablish the vCenter HA setup. That's typically recommended as a little bit easier approach rather than upgrading it while your vCenter HA is up and running. Now, I want to be clear, the vCenter HA is supported as a direct upgrade. So in other words, you don't have to disassemble vCenter HA before you do upgrade, but VMware says, yeah, you're probably going to have a little bit easier time of that if you do. I put a link in the chat window for those of you who want a little more information about that particular process. Now, these are pre-upgrade considerations before we're pulling the trigger. The other thing that I would encourage you to spend some time thinking about discussing in your environment is why. Why are you doing an upgrade? Now, certainly discussing why is not a technical prerequisite, but by fleshing out your motivations for going through the upgrade, what are the new things that you're most looking forward to, the new features, the new options, etc. I think it's good to have that in mind before we start going through the upgrade process, because what that's going to do is help you focus in on, okay, when we're finished with the upgrade, what are the things we're going to turn our attention to first? Again, I think having that kind of goal or direction is a good thing. I'm a very goal-oriented, organized person, so I would want to have that kind of idea in mind of why are we doing this anyway? Now, you may not necessarily have one golden feature that you're looking forward to in vSphere 8. You're like, hey, they all sound good. I'm just going to get up to vSphere 8 because I want to be on the latest and greatest release. That's a great reason. No problem. Now, as we go through the discussion today, we're going to get more and more specific. A couple of more specific things in this pre-upgrade. So I mentioned a moment ago that you have to be on a minimum of vSphere 6.7 to do the direct upgrade. So I put a little screenshot over here. This is a little prerequisite checker that runs when we go through the vCenter upgrade process. And notice I took a screenshot of an error here, which says basically, hey, before vCenter went through its upgrade process, it did a scan of your environment, and oh, look, we found some components that don't qualify for upgrade. The fact that this prerequisite scanner is a part of the vCenter upgrade, that's good. Okay, we like that. Thank you for putting that in there, VMware. But again, hopefully, if we had done our due diligence in analyzing our environment first, we would not have gotten to that specific item out there. Clifton says, we'll be given a copy of this information. The webinar is being recorded out there, so you'll have access to the recording there. One of the things that you can do, Clifton, and this goes for everybody else, some of these links that I'm throwing in the chat window, if you send me a follow-up email, I'll just respond back with a collection of the links out there if you miss copying those down. Now, a couple of other pre-upgrade considerations. So our vSphere environment very often has links to other VMware products that we might be utilizing. So for instance, you're using vSphere, but you're also a Horizon customer, or you're also using some of the vRealize products, which have been renamed to ARIA products now. There are specific sequences that we have to go through as far as, well, if I'm running vRealize products, if I'm running Horizon products, etc., what should I upgrade first? Now, I'm highlighting a knowledge base article from VMware, which I will show you here in just a second, where VMware has documented, oh, here is the order that you need to go through and upgrade things. They quite literally have a set of documentation, a KB article, which lays out exactly what order things need to be done in. Here's a link to the KB article right here. Again, I won't read this to you. You all know how to read, but we would have a look at this and say, okay, well, if I'm running this particular product, this particular product, this particular product, etc., what order would I go through and upgrade those before I finally get to, okay, well, now I can upgrade vSphere out there. This is a really, really handy article to be aware of. Effectively, what you don't want to do is you don't want to jump in, go through your vSphere upgrade, only to realize, oh, you mean I was supposed to upgrade Site Recovery Manager first? Oops. We want to avoid those oops moments out there. So this is a really fantastic resource. Again, take a look at it. You may not be running any of these products, and so you don't care. Also, in this article, it does tell you for these different products, what's the minimum version that you'd have to be running in order to be compatible with these rates. So if you're an NSX customer or something like that. Again, really great resource there. The other resource that I want to point out to you, and this is a website you might be familiar with, and that is the VMware Product Interoperability Matrix. It's kind of a mouthful. So let me show you this website as well. And again, you can throw in your favorites or whatever. This is a really handy website. And what you can do with this website, again, it's posted by VMware, it's official stuff here, is you can go out, and if you're wondering, hey, if I'm running version X of this product and I'm running version Y of another VMware product, are they compatible with each other? Basically, what you do is you go in here and you say, okay, well, I'm running this particular VMware product and its version. I'm then running this particular VMware product and a version, and it just prints out a little grid for you here saying, yep, that's compatible, that's not compatible, etc. Again, we want to make sure that we're not going to break something or something else by jumping through a vSphere upgrade. Now, final item on this, if you are just a vSphere customer, and I don't mean that in a negative way at all, meaning you don't run any other VMware components, you're not using Site Recovery Manager, you're not using vRealize product, you're not using Horizon, etc. You're just using vSphere for virtualization, your life got a little bit more simple. You obviously don't have to worry about all of those interoperability issues. But again, something to be aware of. Stepping back for a moment and looking at the big picture, kind of front to back. What order do I upgrade things in? Or in other words, when I'm going through my upgrade tasks out here, which again, we're going to focus in on some details on a few of these, what order are things prescribed in? And here, we have some very specific guidance from VMware. In other words, it has to be done like this. So the very first thing that you must upgrade is vCenter. There are no choices. You cannot upgrade your ESXi host to V8 before your vCenter is on V8. That is hard and fast. That's the way it works. Now, that's not new in any way, shape, or form. That's the way it always has been. So if you've gone through other upgrades of vSphere, we've always had to do vCenter first. Okay, no big surprise there. After we do vCenter, okay, question from Vern, has a vSphere 8 bundle for VxRail been made available yet? I do not know the exact answer for that. I'm not a regular user of VxRail, so I will have to do a check on that. I'm making myself a note. Vern, if you want to shoot me an email, I can follow up with you on that to double check. I just don't use VxRail much myself personally. So now, in terms of the upgrade, we do vCenter first, and then we roll to our ESXi hosts. Again, I have some specifics on each one of these that I'll get to in a moment. One of the things I've always liked about the upgrade process for vSphere is that the timing is entirely up to you. This is not a do it all at once process. In other words, I may have a maintenance window scheduled this weekend where I'm going to upgrade vCenter. Great, got it done. Now, the next few weeks, we may be really busy doing other things. We may not get around to starting the upgrade process on our host for 3 or 4 weeks. That's fine. Running in what we would kind of call a mixed mode scenario, where I've got my vCenter server upgraded to V8, but my hosts are still sitting out here on V7 or V6.7, that is very, very normal. And really, you could exist in kind of that mixed mode environment, if you like that, as long as you want. Now, we'll talk about upgrading hosts specifically in just a couple of moments. When you get to upgrading your hosts, again, you can do them at your own pace. You could do one a week for the next 5 weeks if you had 5 hosts, whatever. There is no specific, you have to do it in this time frame. You have to do it in a specific order, but not a specific time frame. The middle stage of the migration process, and this is the one area where I'm not going to be spending a ton of time, is some of the specific vSphere components. Like if you use distributed switches are versioned. Once all my hosts are up to V8, I can bump up my distributed switch version. Same thing with vSAN, hardware profiles, etc. These kind of middle stages right here, where all of your hosts have been upgraded to V8. Now we're looking at some of the internal functions of vSphere. These can be done in any order. In other words, I don't have to bump up the distributed switch version before I do my host profiles. Again, those you can interchange in whatever order you want out there. The last thing that we look at upgrading, and I do have some specifics on this coming up, is going to be our VMware tools, the drivers, plugins for our specific VMs, and virtual machine hardware. We have some tools that are going to help us with that, which I will talk about in just a couple of moments. Pay attention to the note that I threw down here at the bottom of the slide. VMware always recommends keeping your VMware tools up to date. Again, VMware tools are the drivers for the virtual hardware, all the other plugins. They're critical to VM functionality. We always want to keep those up to date. In terms of virtual hardware version upgrades, VMware has kind of softened their stance on this a little bit. If you jump in your time machine and go back, VMware traditionally said, yes, keep your VMware tools up to date. Yes, keep your virtual hardware up to date. Just do it. With the virtual hardware, VMware has softened that stance a little bit. And what they advise now is when a new version of virtual hardware is available, take a look at the new things that you're getting with the new version of virtual hardware And you might be able to make a reasonable determination once you read the documentation that, you know what, there's nothing in that version of virtual hardware that we care about. It's not going to benefit us in any way. In that case, VMware says, well, then don't install it. I mean, if you're not going to use any part of it, don't put it out there. It is a slight softening of that viewpoint from VMware. Just be aware of that. Again, we'll talk about how you upgrade those in just a moment. Now, that's kind of the overall kind of front to back process. We're going to jump into a few of these and go through a few more specifics. Since vCenter is first, let's talk about vCenter. First of all, a little terminology for you here. The word upgrade versus the word migrate. When we are talking about vCenter, those are two different things. Now, in your common everyday language, you may use the term upgrade and migrate synonymously. You may flip back and forth, whatever, don't care. But in terms of vCenter, they mean different things. When you go to do the installation of the V8 vCenter, when you drop in the installation media and you run the installer.exe, you're going to see 4 different options here: install, upgrade, migrate, and restore. What we care about is the upgrade and the migrate. If you were doing a brand new installation, like you aren't running vSphere yet, you're installing a brand new, that's an install. The difference between upgrade and migrate: how is your vCenter running right now? If you are on the vCenter appliance, now the vCenter appliance is the Linux-based version of vCenter. That's something that became available back in vSphere 5. If you have already made the transition to the vCenter appliance and we're going to 8, that's an upgrade. You're already on the appliance, you're staying on the appliance. If you are one of the environments who are running vSphere 6, 6X, and you still have a Windows-based vCenter server, that used to be an option back in the day. You build a Windows server, you'd install the vCenter application on that. If you still have your Windows vCenter server and you're going to vSphere 8, realize that the Windows vCenter option is no longer available. It's gone. It actually went away in version 7. But if I have vSphere 6.7 and I'm still on a Windows vCenter server, that is a migrate option. You're going to choose migrate, and what it's going to do is it's going to take your Windows vCenter server and you are going to be migrating over to the Linux-based appliance. The Windows vCenter option is gone. It left in vSphere 7. So that's the difference between upgrade and migrate. If you're on the appliance already, you're choosing upgrade. If you're one of the holdouts and still have a Windows vCenter server, you're choosing migrate. That's the difference. By the way, for those of you who have not changed over to the Linux-based appliance yet, I will tell you that it is a fabulous thing. It's a little bit easier to run. We don't have to babysit a Windows server. We don't have to pay Microsoft a Windows Server license, etc. I've been using the vCenter appliance for many versions now. It is all good. If you're a Windows administrator and you're nervous because it runs on a Linux operating system, don't be nervous. You don't need to have any Linux skills to run that. Don't panic. It's all okay. I'm a Windows guy myself. Okay? It is painless. It's a good thing. Now, in terms of going through that upgrade or migration process for vCenter, a couple of other things to be aware of. Back in vSphere 6, when we were running vCenter, there were actually 2 different components that we were running. 2 different pieces made up your vCenter server. There was something called the Platform Services Controller. It ran like half the services. Then there was another component called your vCenter server. It ran half the services, basically. In other words, back in vSphere 6, vCenter was made up of 2 separate parts. In vSphere 7 and later, that has changed. In vSphere 7 and in vSphere 8, we now have just one single component. It's called the vCenter server that runs all the services. That's a good thing. That architecture change was welcome. It was good. It makes things more simple, less complicated, etc. That is all good. Now, why am I pointing this out to you? When you actually start the upgrade or migration, so you drop the installation media in, you click installer.exe, you choose upgrade versus migrate out there, the first screen you're going to see is going to have this big yellow banner on it right here. And the fact that it's a big yellow banner with an exclamation point in it, you're going to think, oh my gosh, I hit an error already. No, you did not hit an error. That is simply just a message that says, hey, the architecture of vCenter has changed. No longer is it two parts, the platform services controller and the vCenter server. It's just one thing, the vCenter server. The installation program is going to collapse those down into that one single component for you. You don't have to worry about it, etc. So that is a good little warning message there. It is not a bad thing. Do not panic. You didn't break anything yet. So just be aware of that. Also, you will see the item that, hey, in order to jump straight to 8, you got to be on at least 6.7. Mentioned that a whole bunch of times already. Now, the wizard that you are going through to do your vCenter upgrade out here, what it's doing behind the scenes is basically this. You have your original vCenter server. So I'm just going to label this your V7 server right here. That's your current vCenter server. When you're running through this wizard, deploying your new vCenter server, whether it's an upgrade or a migration, either one, doesn't matter. What's actually happening is a new vCenter server is being built for you on version 8, obviously. Once that new machine is built, then the installation program takes all of your configuration data, your settings, your inventory, your performance history, etc., all of the contents of vCenter, and it basically sucks it over and loads it into your new server. So it builds you a brand new device, and then it sucks over all your config, etc., over to the new one. Now, during that process, during that replication, if you want to call it that, you cannot be making any changes to your existing environment. In other words, all your hosts are still running, your VMs are still running, it's not a disruptive process, but while that replication is happening, there's going to be a message on the screen that basically says, okay, sit back and relax, we're replicating now. You can't be doing any administrative work over here because we're grabbing everything and sucking it over. How long that replication takes depends upon how big your environment is. The greater the number of hosts you're managing, the greater the number of VMs you're managing, the more data that's in the vCenter database, that replication is going to take longer. It would not be surprising if that replication would take 30, 45, or even over 60 minutes for some of you. Again, depends upon the size of your environment. At that point in time, again, you just sit on your hands, do nothing, watch the little progress bar, queue up a movie, whatever the heck you want to do, okay? There's nothing you can do during that process. Now, the reason why I mention this is, as administrators, we always want to think of, well, what can go wrong? Let's say halfway through that replication process, you suffer a massive power outage. Your data center goes dark. Bad day for you. During this migration process, Nothing about your existing vCenter server is being removed or changed. So if we had that massive power outage right in the middle of this whole thing, obviously that's going to break the replication. Our new server's not going to be built correctly, etc. You haven't lost anything. You basically have your old vCenter server that is still intact, and you can continue to use this. This is what we would call a non-destructive upgrade. Now, once that replication process finishes, again, you're just sitting back watching the progress bar. As administrators, you should be good at that. When that's all done, the wizard's going to tell you, okay, well, once that replication is done, your new vCenter server has got all the information. It is going to take the name of your old vCenter server, and it's going to take its IP address, and it's going to assign it to your new vCenter server. It is then going to power off your old vCenter server. Notice it doesn't delete it, it powers it off. Now, the fact that it migrates over the name and IP is incredibly important, because all of your ESXi hosts, they're reaching out and talking to their vCenter server. By taking the same name and IP address, throwing it on the new vCenter server, we don't have to touch the hosts. The hosts are just communicating with vCenter like they always do. The fact that it's a different machine, they really don't know any better. Also, the fact that your old vCenter server gets powered off, but not deleted, again, that's important, because if something catastrophic would happen, we still have that old device sitting around, which we could potentially fire up out there. Now, vCenter is the first thing we have to upgrade. Anytime we upgrade a major component like this, it is kind of a nerve-wracking process. You're kind of, is it going to work, etc. But overall, this is not a difficult process to go through. If you've done your homework, you've checked all the prerequisites like we talked about before, this is something that should go pretty smoothly. Now, once you've got vCenter upgraded, if I go backwards here to my sequence document, so we've got vCenter done. Now, at your pace, whatever pace you want to do, we can start looking at upgrading our ESXi hosts. And again, you don't have to do them at the same time, do them one at a time, one a week, whatever. The timing is entirely up to you. When it comes to upgrading your ESXi hosts, there are several different methods, if you want to call it that, that you could potentially be using to do the actual host installation. Now, I'm going to drop another link in the chat window for you here to some documentation. We could be doing a manual install, just literally drop in the CD or DVD, reboot the server, go through the upgrade process. I'll go through that with you in a second. There are options for doing a scripted upgrade using the command line, the auto deploy tool. There are several mechanisms by which you can go through that upgrade process. Now, that link that I threw in the chat window for you, here is that page. Okay, if you visit that page and just scroll down, each one of these options is going to have a link that says, oh, you want to use this option? Here you go. Here's the documentation. Here's how you actually do that. So again, just a really, really nice set of documentation to be aware of. Obviously, depending upon the number of ESXi hosts that you have to upgrade, that's really going to influence your decision of, okay, how much automation do I want to use for this? In other words, if I'm a small shop and I only have 2 ESXi servers, I'm probably going to do those manually because A, it's pretty quick, not that hard. I've only got 2 to do, no big deal. If I have 200 or 2,000 ESXi host to upgrade, well, doing each one of those manually, that's a lot more work. I'd probably be looking at one of the methods to help me with automation. The downside to the automation methods is you need to invest time into building and perfecting the automation method. Of course, the positive of that is big picture, long term. Okay, it's going to help you in getting through things faster. So it's always that push and pull between that. One of the things that I always do, and this is just my personal habit, I'm not saying you have to adopt my habits out there. No matter how many servers that I have to upgrade, I always like to do my first upgrade manually. In other words, either burn the installer to a CD/DVD or put it on a USB drive. I like to touch and feel and do the first server manually. I am a little bit old-fashioned, self-professed old guy here. There is something that is satisfying for me or reassuring to sit in front of that server, drop the installation media in, again, put it in maintenance mode, reboot the server, run through the wizard, see the upgrade happen, reboot the server, see it come back online, all the services start, etc. Doing that manually, at least on my first server, I'll almost always do that. Now, if I have 200 more to do, I'm probably not doing that on all 200. I'm going to use some automation method. Again, that's me. Now, as always, a little preparation goes a long way. Before we upgrade our hosts, one of the things that we need to be doing is verifying hardware compatibility. Just because your hardware, and we're talking your servers, your processors, your storage controllers, your NICs, etc., just because your hardware works on version X, whatever you're running today, does not automatically mean it's going to be supported on version Y. That's not the way hardware support works. Older things age out and they're no longer supported. We should always be checking our compatibility first. Now, there's two good ways to check hardware compatibility. The best way is talk to your server vendors. When you're using a top tier server vendor, again, pick your favorites, the IBMs of the world, the HPs, the Dells, etc. One of the things you pay your hardware vendor for support is getting on the line with them and saying, hey, is my server compatible with vSphere 8? They'll tell you. Okay? That's the best thing to be able to do. You can go out to the VMware HCL, the hardware compatibility list, and go through the process of checking your hardware against whatever version of vSphere you're going to run, but you do need to do that. Now, let me give you an example of a really worst case scenario. So let's say I'm upgrading a server manually. I burn the installer to a CD/DVD. I put my host in maintenance mode, drop the CD in, reboot the host, and I'm going through the installer. And when that server is booting up, I see a message like this pop up on the screen. That would be a bad day. A very, very bad day. What that error message is telling you is that the physical CPUs in your host are not supported with the version of vSphere you're trying to install. Do not pass go, do not collect $200, eject the CD, reboot your server, nothing bad happened to it, but it can't run the new version. Your CPUs are not compatible. I'm pointing this out. One of the things that happened back in the vSphere 7 upgrade is VMware aged out a couple of processors that were really super popular back in the day, some of the vSphere processors, and lots of customers got caught out by that. Now, if that happens to you, if my physical CPUs and my servers are not compatible with the new version, you got to go talk to the boss and say, hey, boss, give me the credit card because we need to buy more servers out here. There's no getting around that. So again, check your hardware compatibility first. Now, assuming your hardware is compatible, because you're going to check it, when you are doing an installation on an ESXi host, you're going to be presented with an option, and here is that option. It is going to be whether or not you want to do an in-place upgrade of the host Or do you want to do a clean install? This is obviously a screenshot from the manual installer. Now, if you choose upgrade, it is going to keep all the configuration, all of the data on that host intact. It's going to keep the same name, IP address, standard switch configuration, etc. You're simply just upgrading the OS, basically. It's like you upgrade your Windows OS. If you choose install, that's a clean install. You're wiping the existing installation and you're installing a brand new copy. You would be responsible then for repopulating all of that stuff that got wiped. The name, the IP address, all the local configuration, storage configuration, standard switch configuration, etc. Now, whether you do an in-place upgrade or you do a clean install, as admins like to call it, that is very much a personal preference, and I'm not going to try to convince you one way or the other. My experience and my preference for ESXi hosts specifically, I'm not talking about other vendors, I'm talking about VMware, I will generally do an in-place upgrade. The ESXi operating system itself is a fairly small, focused operating system. There's not a lot of moving parts to it. I have had great luck with doing the in-place upgrade. Again, I don't have to reconfigure my host. Very often, I will have administrators who come in, it's like, we always do clean installs. And when I ask them why, they'll say, well, we've had problems with our Windows servers in the past where when we do in-place upgrades, we upgrade problems. And I tell them, stop right there. You're talking about the Windows OS. ESXi is not the Windows operating system. Now, I'm a Microsoft trainer, been so for 25 years. I'm not bagging on Microsoft here. But when you look at the operating system itself, comparing ESXi, which is a very tight, focused, small operating system, to a Windows Server operating system, which has a million different parts to it, that's definitely apples and oranges. Again, if you have a preference on clean install versus upgrade, great. Whatever your preference is, that's fine. Personally, I've had great luck with the upgrade process, and it saves me a little bit of work after the fact of I don't have to go in and reprogram my host out there. Now, there's one last technical item with respect to upgrading your or installing the ESXi operating system that I need to talk about, and it's something that VMware started talking about last fall, and it kind of freaked people out. And that is the disks. So for many, many years, the trend on physical servers was that physical servers were being outfitted either with internal SD cards or little USB drives that when we did our ESXi installation, we were actually installing the ESXi operating system onto the SD card or USB media. That was a very, very common option, to the point where for several years, when you were going to a top tier server vendor and speccing out servers and saying, oh, this is going to be a, an ESXi host, a VMware server, they're saying, oh yeah, great, we've got these embedded SD cards to install your ESXi on. You don't need to waste a real disk for that. VMware has made a pretty radical change with that, insofar as VMware's experience, again, talking with customers like you, the long-term reliability of those SD cards / USB devices as installation media is a little bit questionable, is a little bit suspect. Now, what happened when vSphere 8 was launched is VMware put out some guidance that basically said, we're deprecating that. We're no longer going to support you, the customer, installing ESXi onto an SD card or USB media. You have to install on a persistent disk, basically a real disk. Now, when VMware put out that guidance, it kind of freaked a lot of customers out. You can't imagine the number of questions I got from students on that. They're like, but all of our servers have these SD cards and we don't want to buy new servers, and et cetera, et cetera. So what I want to share with you is the updated guidance from VMware. And this is straight from the horse's mouth here. So VMware is encouraging all customers to move away from using SD cards or USBs as the installation media. They're saying, don't do that anymore. The reliability of those devices, okay, is not what it needs to be. So you should be looking at using a real disk. Doesn't have to be a huge disk. Throw a little SSD in there, maybe mirror it and install onto that. What VMware has changed is the actual support message. And notice right here, first bullet point, and I took this right from the KB article, by the way, VMware will continue to support, meaning you are officially supported, okay, using an SD card, USB as a boot device through the vSphere 8 product release, including update releases. So basically for vSphere 8, that is still officially supported. Now, be very clear. VMware is recommending to everybody, yeah, you probably need to stop doing that. Those are not as reliable as they need to be. So either transition off or make plans to transition off, etc. But for vSphere 8, you are supported in doing that. Recommend moving away. As far as post vSphere 8, expect that support will no longer exist after vSphere 8. So vSphere 9 or 10 or whatever comes next. Okay, that is no longer going to be a supported option out there. And again, I put a link to that knowledge base article out there for you to take a look at as far as some specific guidance there. That did freak people out when that announcement was made. Again, they've softened that position just a little bit. All right, let's talk about the last stage of the migration. I'm almost at my time here. I can talk all day. That's what trainers do. So all of our ESXi hosts are upgraded. Good job. Whether that took you a weekend to do or 6 months, whatever. So the last thing we would be looking at doing is upgrading VMware tools and virtual machine hardware. Again, the more critical of those would be VMware tools. For that, the best way to upgrade those is to use Lifecycle Manager. Now, if you are not familiar with Lifecycle Manager yet, Lifecycle Manager is something that was introduced in vSphere 7. It is effectively the replacement for vSphere Update Manager, VUM, the component we used to have to keep our hosts patched, etc. In vSphere 7, VUM, vSphere Update Manager, went away. It was replaced with Lifecycle Manager. Again, I could talk for a half a day on Lifecycle Manager. There's a lot of things that go along with it, but Lifecycle Manager, it's installed by default. It's on your vCenter server. You don't have to put it there. It's going to be there. Two features that it has is it allows you to centrally see all of the VMs you're running, what version of VMware tools are they running, and do they need an update? Are they up to date, etc. You can use Lifecycle Manager to schedule the upgrade of the VMware tools. Again, centrally, whenever you want to schedule that, you can take a snapshot of the VMs before the upgrade. You can delete the snapshot after a certain amount of time, etc. It gives you a very, very nice central option for that. You don't have to click on each VM and upgrade. It's VMware tools out there. The same thing is true for virtual machine hardware. Again, see all of my VMs, what version of virtual machine hardware are they on, pick which ones I want to upgrade, when I want to do that, etc. Take a snapshot, delete the snapshot after a certain amount of time, etc. That is all something that can be done using Lifecycle Manager. If you're a glutton for punishment and you would prefer to update each one individually, well, you can go to each VM in the vSphere client, update each one individually, but that'd be a lot of work. Use Lifecycle Manager to do that. Okay? It is absolutely the way to go. Now, if we go back and take a look at the overall upgrade or update sequence that I had up earlier, We started off with vCenter, then our ESXi hosts. Again, I didn't spend much time talking about all the middle components because that would take forever. But again, your virtual switch versions, your vSAN components, host profiles, things like that. Okay, those can be done quite literally at any time, at any order out there. The last vSphere components before we can say, yes, we are all completely done, would be VMware tools. And then if you have decided to upgrade your virtual machine hardware. Now, that seems like a lot of work, and it can be, absolutely. However, keep in mind that from a timing perspective, this can all happen as fast or as slow as you want. Again, if I'm a small environment, I've got one vCenter server, I got 2 ESXi hosts, I could come in on Saturday and have the whole thing done in a couple of hours. I have hundreds of hosts or thousands of them scattered around the world. This process could take 6 months or more. That is entirely up to you. All right, before I turn things back over to our host, Brandon, here for a second, he has a message for you. Let me just mention a couple of things here. So New Horizons obviously is a training provider. I'm a trainer. I teach this stuff. There are 3 classes that I would recommend you take a look at potentially if you want to get educated on vSphere 8. The first one is there's a What's New class. If you are an experienced vSphere administrator, you've been using vSphere for years, you know the ins, the outs, etc. You can set it all up, and you just want to know what's new, what's changed, there's a 2-day What's New class. If you want to learn vSphere from the ground up, how we install vCenter, hosts, manage them, clustering, networking, storage, etc., kind of that all things vSphere. The first class you take is the Install, Configure, Manage class. That gets you up to date on all of the basic core functionality of vSphere. And then if you want to take one step further, the advanced class, if you want to call it that, would be the Optimize, Scale, and Secure, which is basically, yep, I know all of the basics of building hosts and vCenter and storage and networking, etc. Now I want to go to the next level, some higher end performance, higher end security things. The Optimize, Scale, and Secure is kind of that second class. I teach all of these classes. If you have questions about them, I can certainly help you. Your New Horizons account executives can give you information on scheduling. They can give you information on pricing, etc. out there. Now, before I open things to questions, I'm going to call on Brandon. He is our host here. He has one quick thing he wants to tell you about ending the webinar here. I'll turn it over to Brandon, and then I'll just give you some time for questions.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everyone so much for coming. Like Sean said, we will jump back into any Q&A if you have any. But first off, let's throw an applause or say thank you in the chat for Sean and his time. This has been very, very beneficial and helpful. We'd like for you to be able to connect with us on LinkedIn, follow us, all that. Like Sean said, you're able to email him also. So please, if you have further questions, you're more than welcome to do so. Once you leave this webinar, you will be asked a question of if you'd like to continue the conversation. It's really what Sean was just explaining right before I hopped on in terms of discussing, do you want to learn more? How can we support you as New Horizons in your learning and development? And really connecting you with the account executives to be able to figure out what your needs are and finding the right courses for you. So that's just what that question means of, would you like to continue the conversation? Yes or no. But I will hand it back over to Sean in terms of if anyone has any Q&A.
Excellent. Thank you, Brandon. And again, at this point in time, if you are ready to get back to your day or whatever, you can close out of the Zoom window that signs you out, etc. If you have any questions for me, go ahead and toss me in the chat window out there. I'll take whatever you got. If you stump me with a question, I'll find the answer. And again, you can always follow up with me in email. You see my email address in the chat window and also on the screen. They're always happy to chat with you. And of course, would love to see you in a class sometime. That's always our goal.